So hello and welcome to the Dharma Life podcast. I'm your host, Aloise.life Middleton. And this week I have with me a very dear friend of mine who lives in Denmark, and she was instrumental in my name change. And she is also instrumental in the leading numerology school in Denmark, if not the world. So Estel Evhass, welcome to the Dharma Life podcast.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming back. You've been instrumental in a lot of things in my life, and you've been on the podcast before. And I thought, let's get Estelle back because she's always got so much insight and wisdom into what is happening on the planet right now in relation to its numerology. So before we start, do you mind just sharing with our audience a little bit about your work, who you are, what you do in the world?
Yes, so I am a numerologist, and I work with both name change, which is like a big part of it, like you've changed your name to get better energies, new vibrations. And me and my husband has a numerology school and education where we teach people how to use numerology in their own life. For example, looking in your day-to-day energies or your month-to-month energies, the global energies for the whole world, for specific countries, for businesses, and also the name change. So it's a little bit like, for people who don't know at all what is numerology, it's a little bit like astrology, but completely different system. But you can use many of the things in the same way to get more like insight in the energies behind what is actually moving the world forward.
Lovely. And your specialism is Chaldean numerology. Could you explain what Chaldean numerology is, please?
Yes. So our research has actually shown that at one point in time, most probably all the numerology systems was one system. So, but in today's world, there's a big difference between, for example, what is called Pythagorean numerology and Chaldean. And then there's some subcategories, for example, Indian numerology and others. But the main difference between Pythagorean, which is probably the most known, is the alphabet. And then in Pythagorean, you have the alphabet is like A is number one because of its placement in the alphabet, B, 2, 3, C, 3, and so on. Where in Chaldean, it's a more old alphabet that has a very, very like thousands of years of origins, and it's based on the phonetics, the vibrations, the sounds. So it's not according to the order of the alphabet. Then also Chaldean numerology looks into more numbers, where Pythagorean looks mostly at 1 to 9, and then the master numbers 11, 22, 33, and so on. Then Chaldean go into more in depth of each number and can look into numbers up till 99, but even further than that. So there would be a difference between 102 and 5,737 or whatever high numbers you can look into and decode and interpret. So there's some big differences. And then also in the charts, and by charts I mean like the numeroscope charts, there's a big difference, and the Chaldean is more has more charts, has more things to say, has more numbers, has more like areas of life that you can look into via the numerology charts. So that's some of the main differences.
Oh, and then the Chaldeans were a very ancient sort of civilization. I'm thinking a bit like, were they like the Atlanteans and the Lemurians? So kind of had a lot of wisdom that they could utilize and share.
Yeah. They have a lot of connection with the Sumerians.
Okay.
And most probably, and I know many people think like that the numerology of the Chaldean system was somehow brought by a higher civilization who knew more than we do now about vibration. And
Just got goosebumps then.
Yeah, me too. Then there's also some, and of course it's all like a mixture between speculation and intuition, because we don't have the sources dating that far back. We do have something.
Well, you'll have to let me do your Akashic record, because I'd be able to see if you've been a numerologist in a past life. Because my friend Rania, who was on our show, is an astrologer, and she's had 16 lifetimes as a as a astrologer, and I've had 10 lifetimes as a spiritual teacher. So the chances of you having had lifetimes as a numerologist, I reckon, are pretty high.
Most probably. I know I've been in India for many times. And they have a lot of numerology. Yeah.
So did you, because obviously the conversation we're in this podcast is how to build a 5D life in alignment with your soul. And so we're talking about ascension, we're talking about really becoming our multidimensional self. But before we get into that, like looking back at 2020, could you see what was going to happen in 2020 from the numbers? So I'd love to just have a look at 2020 before we look at 2021, and then maybe what people can expect moving forward.
Yeah, good idea. Well, 2020, we always do the interpretation of the year some like 3-4 months ahead of January, together with our students, and we talk to them a lot about that. There's a specific number in 2020 that was worrying us a little bit, and that's the number 40. The number 40 is a number of tests, spiritual tests, and they can be hard. Like Jesus was fasting in the desert for 40 days, and there are like lots of other examples where in history you're using the number 40 for something that you really have to overcome. And
Right.
and you do that alone. So the number 40 is also called the hermit or the loner, the little bit feeling a little bit alone and cut off from the world.
Wow.
So we thought, okay, that is what is called in the inner diamond for 2020, which means the inner diamond is like the feeling inside throughout the whole year. So we were speculating, what could that be? It
That's
turns out,
exactly what we've experienced, isn't it? We've all
yeah,
been called to go inward and do our inner work.
yeah, exactly. And so that's a very good example of actually how numerology works. I mean, you would have to do a very qualified guessing to know that, okay, that's a corona crisis, but it totally fits everybody's experience with like being locked down and no social interaction and so on. So yeah, many people have had the challenge of the number 40 in their inner life, feeling maybe lonely, feeling cut off, and so on. But in numerology, there's always some good things in a number. So it's not like you say like okay, the whole year was just like totally bad. There's always a lesson, and there's always a meaningful way of using even the number 40. For example, to be
Almost like the positive polarity of the number.
yes, the positive balanced version of the number, and that's like the awakening the intelligence, the ability to think really like for yourself, being a little bit nerdy about what you're doing and studying things in depth. And that's exactly what you do have time for when you're maybe like not at work and you're home and so on. So that's like the
So that was the best way to utilize. Sorry to interrupt. That was like exciting. So the best way to utilize 2020 was to go and study and go inward, and which is exactly what I did. I had finished all my qualifications.
great.
Yeah, all the
Yeah,
stuff that I'd been like kind of hanging around with. I actually got my head down and got on with it.
super. And even researching things and like getting to the
Ah.
bottom of the things and like what is really behind the scenes. That's all the good things about 40.
I think a lot of people were doing that.
Yeah, I think so too. And then, okay, in the same time, of course, you might feel a little bit lonely sometimes, or feel that you're cut off the social field that you're usually in, right? So you can feel some of the balanced, some of the imbalanced qualities in the same time. But as long as if we know what energies is in a year, we can consciously try to go after the.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's exactly why I wanted to have you on, because if it's like, another dear friend of mine, Nicholas Haynes, he does fantastic Chinese medicine readings. And as soon as you know the energy of the year, you can lean into the positive of it and not lean into the negative of it. Wow. Okay. So 2020. So you knew something big was coming. You just didn't know how it was going to show up.
Yeah, we were guessing actually because what is called the outer diamond is the number called Heal the World. It's a number that is either something about health or
Mm,
environment.
mm.
We thought, okay, health, well, maybe, but we thought probably environment. There had been so much with Greta Thunberg and a lot of things going on in the world. It was very much like in the ether. So we thought probably it's something with the environment. And it was the health, and these are kind of the same, this number is about those two things. So, but in the same time, we have a nickname for the number called the Greenpeace number, because even Greenpeace chose the name. Greenpeace is actually the number 42 if you calculate the name. So that's a bit funny.
Wow.
So we, in the outer diamond, seeing that it was about health and or environment, and then something with isolation, we had this feeling, okay, might be some natural disaster, or some kind of with the environment that you stay indoor, or we had this feeling that, okay, you need to stay indoor. That was something we were sure of. So, but you never know exactly how they will manifest before you. And then immediately when we saw, we were in Spain on holiday, we saw the first people wearing masks, and we heard about the corona. It was like, okay, here it comes already from
Right. So you
very.
were quite mentally prepared for the whole thing, really, by the sounds of things. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And so that's exciting. So 2021. So I when I contacted Estel to sort of ask if she would come on the show, I said, please tell me that 2021 is going to be better. And you were like, yes, much better. So I would love to know what 2021 has in store.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, 2020 was a number 4 year, and in number 4 years, you always have a certain karmic challenge, something you have to overcome, and a lot of changing things. Like the energies is different. It represents a huge shift. Where number 5 is the 2021 is a number 5 year, and number 5, it's much more light energy. It's much more about communication, new possibilities, friends, connections, being curious, being open-minded, very much emphasis on communication and even business. So it's a year that is, I would say the headline would be like new possibilities, but only for the ones who are able to think outside of the box.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And I remember looking it up. Now, this might be a different version of numerology, but when I was looking at the beginning, because I like to look at the start of every year, and it 5 was representing more freedom.
Yes. Also,
right?
Yeah, also that. So in 1 year, you have the main energy is like a number from 1 to 9. And the main energy for 2021 is number 5. Then we have a lot of sub energies. And one of them, the outer diamond, as we call it, is number 52-7. It's actually called free speech. It's about communicating globally, and in, you can say, open discussions, being very open-minded to all kinds of opinions. So this energy is good to use in 21, so that we have to be careful of what is the inner diamond, the number called 51-6. That is a number that can create, like us versus them, polarization between people, groups of people, like these are my friends, these are my enemies, this kind of split, like in a war time, like you have like one team and then another team fighting. And we have to be careful about that, and then to use the positive side of this, the outer diamond 52-7, free speech, getting connected globally. Might be something with the internet. It makes sense already that, because I mean we're still in lockdown many places, so that people start really using the internet much more, connecting in groups throughout the world. So it's like a big focus on the global vibe, international vibe.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've still got this polarity split that we're seeing, though, because it does feel to me like this is the two worlds really happening like at the moment on the planet massively. But what you're saying is to use the positive polarity of the energy is to really access your right to free speech, but do that through global communities and almost forming our own global communities.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And then being careful not to be too polarized and to split, and to not create enemies from the opposite groups, trying to create dialogue and communication instead, because the main energy is also number 5. We do need to communicate, So this year, every time you have a problem, some kind of blockage, some things that's not going your way, you're thinking communication is kind of the solution, the main solution to anything this year. So even this split, even though you're maybe right and the other ones are not, then still the solution is much better to say, okay, dialogue is better than just like, you're wrong, I'm right, or whatever kind of polarization that you make.
Yeah, and I think that's really important point, because this unity consciousness that we are going into, doesn't mean that we have to agree with everybody. We just have to realize that we're one human race.
Yeah.
And I can see that people are splitting off into, oh, well, they think the same as me, they believe the same as me, so I want to be around them. But actually, like what you're saying is, it's about everybody continuing that dialogue and really understanding that everybody is a human being.
Yeah.
We're all on the same side.
Yeah.
And actually, for us to go together, everybody needs to go together, even if their views are different. We have certain views about different things. We're all humans who require our human rights.
Yes, exactly. And especially because it's in the inner life, 51.6 is like in the emotions, like 44, the lonely energy was in the emotions in 20. So now it's like in this number 5 here, we can probably sometimes feel the energy pushing us to be a little bit like, okay, even family members or friends who are not having the same view as us, we tend to set them in a box that, okay, they're in the wrong box and I'm in the right box. So we have to be very careful, especially in our emotional life and even in our close relationships, to not make this distinction. I mean, as you say, we can disagree and still be like a unity, right? And communication and dialogue is the main.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, because especially at the moment, you've got, I don't want to put labels, but you've got people who are more in the narrative and people who are less in the narrative. If I look at my own family, for example, I'm not in the narrative, but my family's in the narrative. But I don't want to lose the communication and then relationship that I've got with my family, even though I don't necessarily agree with what it is that they think is happening.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think out there, everybody listening, we have to be the ones to really lead the way with this, because the polarization, So could you explain the negative? Because if there's obviously a positive polarity and there's a negative polarity. So I presume if we don't do this, we're going to split even further by the sounds of things.
Yeah. So this number 51.6 is in many ways a difficult energy, because it has this tendency to push you into like, this is my view, it's totally right and you are wrong. And that is why in the old numerology text it says it's a number that can create enemies and split between people. However, it's also a number with a very strong code of love, you could say, because it ends in number 6. 51.6 we call it. It's like 5 plus 1 is 6, and 6 is the Venus energy, is the feminine energy, is the love energy. So the code to having this number in balance is to feel the love even towards people you don't agree with, even people who maybe they see them as your enemy or you see them as your enemy. Like this, like totally kind of a little bit like Gandhi way of seeing the things, right? To don't hate, or like the Tibetans, to don't hate the people who are actually not nice to you, and try to like both forgive but also like communicate the number 5 and talk it through. And doesn't mean that you have to sit in every family dinner and try to convince stuff or have like political discussions, but even just let people be and talk about something else if you feel that, okay, this is like a blockage. It's like creating a bad atmosphere when we talk together. So, but the negative in 51.6 is this tendency to, make other people wrong a little bit, make yourself right. It's a number of war. It's also a number that is said in the old text that be careful not to interfere with other people's business, in the sense that you can still communicate, but you don't have to like go over their borders and tell them what to think and when and in what order. They have their own process, they have their own timeline and tempo, and you can't really push people too much with that number because it will create conflict. So that's like, if it's like parents interfering too much with the kids, then they are like pushing back, right? So it's the same with friends and family and groups of people. If you push the other one too much towards your own agenda, they will just like revolt against you, right? So it's this energy. I hope it's more clear.
Oh, such good advice. Like, I'm just looking at all the different relationships I've got in my life right now,
Yeah.
and that is appearing left, right, and center. So, I think it's really, really valid advice for people listening, and I'm sure they're doing the same. I think for us to rise as a collective, to rise together, we have to come through this, and whatever's happening on the collective scale will be happening on a micro scale, so macrocosm, microcosm. So if you're saying that this is like the general theme on the planet, this will be happening in our own lives as well, for us to transcend. So it's really good advice, because it's so easy to dig into your opinion, especially I think sometimes in the awakened community, they're like, well, we're awake and you're asleep,
Yeah.
and actually that is judgment. And when you judge somebody, it lowers your vibration.
Yes.
And like you said, everybody's on their own journey with their own contracts and their own agreements. So we just have to honor their process.
Exactly. So with this little more openness towards and tolerance, this energy will be harmonized. So it's much better like this. Even though you can have good intentions with your 516 number energy, you can have good intentions, but the other people might feel judged or pushed or some put in a box somewhere, right? So that's why it can create this conflict. I can give a good example actually. United States has this number in the what is called a pillar of their numeroscope, their name numeroscope. They have this on the pillar, and without getting like, I'm not like politically judging if what they do is good or bad, but they do have the tendency as a country to maybe however good the intentions might be, to go to another country and interfere somehow, good or bad, in their affairs. And that is the 516 energy that's pushing United States to do that, which can be good, can be bad in different circumstances. But it's just like, you have to be very careful to use it in a positive way. So even then, if you have good intentions, you might create like more animistic vibe.
More problems.
Yeah, because you have your own like agenda.
Yes.
So that's a number you have to be very careful to use very well. So that's the thing about it. It is a challenging number. And again, in 20, we also had a challenging number inside the number 40. It was a completely different challenge. But now this challenge, it's much more coming through.
And is this like the theme for the whole year? So is this kind of present? Oh, we're kind of lost a bit of connection.
Now you're back. I was just
yeah, it's back. Sorry about that. It disappeared for a second. Sorry, finish up what you were saying.
What was I saying?
Don't worry. All I was saying was, is that like the background? Oh, is it gone again? Background theme for the year?
Oh,
are we back?
Can you repeat?
Is that the background theme for the year? So all year we're going to have to be careful not to polarize. All year we're going to have to, be sure to come together, even though our views are different. So it's a whole year we've got to navigate this challenge.
Yes, it is. So these energies that we talked about now, it's global for every person living on the planet, even though in whatever country, and it's the whole year. So it's like a whole package for the whole year.
Okay, amazing, fantastic. And then you very kindly looked at different countries for us as well, like the kind of bigger countries, just to see. I'd love to start with England, if you don't mind, just because we're in lockdown still here, and it's just beyond a joke now. And they're talking about keeping us in lockdown till, I've even heard rumors of July. People are saying March, but
yeah,
everybody's going a bit stir crazy, myself included. Like you love your friends and family, but there's only so much time you can spend under one roof with them. Everybody needs to get out.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so what I would be looking at now is a bit more complex, a lot of numbers together. It's what's called the yeros. If you compare it to astrology, it's like the personal transits for a person or a country. So there's a lot more different energies. Where in the global year we just talked about, there are like one main energy and three sub energies. So for UK, I could say that you do have some challenging times right now and ahead, and it's clear in the Euros that in 2020 the first wave, as we call it with the corona, was much smaller than the second wave, which is October till something like March. And you can see that I would say it's a qualified guess, because you have like something that could look like a little bit of a break over the late spring, summer. But then again, already in August, late July, August, it looks like you get these numbers that's about losing freedom, losing energy. So it could look a little bit, I'm sorry to say, but it's not like that the end of the year, even from August, it's a bit of could be lockdown again, or it could be some difficult situations of these numbers are called karmic purification numbers. So it's good to and they are a little bit introverted as well. So if you get locked down again from, it's the exact date is 28th of July, and it doesn't have to be exactly that, but it's around that date.
So we kind of get locked potentially, and obviously this is an educated guess. The end of March, we might have some freedom till the 28th of July.
Yes, it looks like there's a break during the summer because you have some pretty good numbers and more like for relaxation, and then more like self-confidence of the country is building a little bit up, where you can see that that the end of the year is a little more difficult. So I would say it's also a challenging year row that you do have right now, and actually it's the same as in the what happened in the, I think you call it the Battle of England during World War II. Is that how you call it? Or the Battle of Britain? Or
the Battle of Britain. Oh, okay. Well, it's got the same energy numbers. Wow.
Yeah, you do have almost the same numbers. So that was from May 1940 till May 1941. So that break is probably like March, May, in between then, and then the summer. So actually it's the same numbers that you do have again. So I would say when you look further on, it's gonna be much better. But it is so that exactly UK do have a little bit more hard numbers in this period than many other countries. So it is expected that it might be a little more difficult there than, for example, in Australia, who has very good
New Zealand, nobody's in lockdown whatsoever. So
yeah. So it is clear, but it's good to know that okay, everything is there for a reason. It's like every country has its cycle that it goes through. It lasts 27 years, sometimes 108 years, and you do go through some processes, right? So that like it's meant to learn, to teach us something.
sure.
Yeah, so but it's not like I can say okay, it's gone tomorrow, right? So it looks like a little break again over the spring, summer, and then lockdown again in August.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Interesting stuff. And then you had a look at a few different countries. What were the other countries you looked at? America?
Yeah, America. Let's take that. Just a second. Yeah. Again, I would say in 2020, we were a little bit puzzled when we looked at United States euros, because they again have the same euro as another big historic event, which was like the Big Depression in 1930. So, and they have but it's a little different, but there's the number of disaster, which is like a number called 448. And then followed by a number called the world conqueror. And when the world conqueror comes, it tends to like amplify what's just behind it. It's like a lavine. So this disastrous energy is a little bit like going out of control. So we did expect a little bit of craziness happening there. And also the riots you can see in the number called 43.7. It's a number called Revolution and Riots in the Old Text by for example, a numerologist called Kiro. He described it as such. So it was not a huge surprise with the riots. And again, it's a little bit like with numerology. You have to have this good, bad, who knows attitude toward the things, because you can also see that it's in general for a greater good, and it is kind of a purification process.
Sure.
Somehow necessary. So, but of course, it's not the most like yes, but it was really a challenging year for United States. On top of that, you can also look at, for example, the euros for the president, and that was also very interesting with Trump's euros. For example, he has the number called court cases 28.1. Also in the old text, it says beware of court cases, because you get a lot of
left, right, and center.
Yeah, things like that. And also he has a number called the religious leader. And when we saw that, we were like, Trump, a religious leader, okay. But somehow, for me at least now, I'm like, okay, but he does really have followers and supporters who do have
Patriots, very Bible
of like following him in a way that was not evident in the beginning of the year 2020. So it's really interesting how they all like turn out. For USA in the Kitty, I have lost a note for the USA. What do we do? Can we take a small cut out here?
Okay, so let's have a look at the United States now. What does their numeroscope and numbers look like moving forward in 2021?
Yeah, so the euros, it could be a pretty challenging year again, 21. In general, there's some numbers for the finances that doesn't look so good, which is probably obvious by now already that could be an issue. So that's reflected in what is called the money triad, but with the number of losing together with these. It's like the numbers 5, 8, and 3. But when the number 3 is in the form of 12, 3, then it indicates losing some money. And for a country, that would be like the finances are dropping and things like that. So it doesn't look so good from that perspective. But in the same time, you could say that there's a lot of possibilities for the people, again, a little bit like in the year 21, for the ones who are able to think out of the box. There's a lot of good possibilities. And even the world conqueror energy again, which is like the one that's like, if you take the initiative, it's like rolling. But it could look a little bit difficult again, as in the UK, but especially from around September and the rest of the year, it doesn't look so good again. It could be a little bit of a break, but it's shorter than in the UK, and it comes a little bit later. So it would be like really the month that looks really good. It's June and July. August, okay, and then already September, it looks like all the karmic numbers are adding up, and even also these, what we could say, catastrophe numbers. Doesn't mean like it's a specific catastrophe, it's just called catastrophe numbers because it's like, okay, we have changes that didn't go in the way we wanted it. So it's I'm sorry not to have very, very good news, but it's a little bit challenging year again.
Okay.
However, it's important to think this, that you do have a lot of possibility if you think differently. So that's like a quote for people living in the United States: think completely different than you usually do, and outside the box, and get really like new ideas that even seem like, if it seems a little crazy to you, it's probably a good idea, that vibe. And That is the number 13-4, which is like the end result of the year. And it's about big change. And it's about the people who can see like the new paradigm and get a boost in your new ways of
Yeah,
doing things.
that's what I was getting when you were talking. It's almost like for the people who are awake and living in the fifth dimension, you know, they're doing things differently anyway, so it will work almost.
Yeah.
And that was the vibe I picked up, rightly or wrongly, when you said about the 5 year for the planet. You know,
Yeah.
it's about doing things differently outside of the box, not, you know, I've really found that, you know, my business has totally taken off, but it's the Akashic Record stuff, which is really interesting. So it's almost like the sort of more traditional stuff, it, you know, is maybe a little bit outdated, but really people are interested in their past lives now, you know.
Yeah.
So that, I suppose that was how I read into what you were saying.
Exactly. So it's both in the global energy of the 5 year. We
Mm.
have to think a little bit outside of the box. And that's because in 2021, in the center energy, there's the number 13 as well. And also United States has this 13 very much prevalent in the euros as it's the result of the year. So it's probably like if you're trying to do the things that you like you're used to, it won't work so well and you can lose finances if you think,
So you've got to adapt and change and
yeah, exactly.
yeah. And it's
And
so interesting because here in this country, I've noticed like, you know, all the food places are changing how they're doing things. You know, they're doing deliveries and they're doing takeaways and they're kind of, you know, doing these boxes. And, you know, I got a box of brownies in the post the other day. And, you know, people are just changing how they're doing their businesses to adapt to the current circumstances. So that's kind of the advice by the sounds of things. You've got to, if it's not working, change it so it works for the current environment.
exactly. And the more wild and crazy, the more it's probably a good idea again.
And then you said Trump's numbers were, you know, you
Yeah,
could see the court cases last year. What
yeah.
can you see in his future this year?
Yes, let's take a look. Of course, there's a lot of energies. There's a lot of different numbers. It's like transits in astrology, so it's different where we look. But what is brings to my eyes is that he actually probably feels okay, even though he lost the election and so on. He has some strong numbers for like building yourself up, getting very fast back on track, and having self confidence. But then again, he can be a little more sensitive during the spring and summer. And then I can see that he has a lot of what is called international numbers, numbers that can suggest travel. I guess could be that he could leave the country, maybe for good, maybe not. But there's a lot of emphasis on the seven energy, which is like global, international, and there's a lot of change energies in the same time. So he would probably go somewhere else. It starts from 18th of June and lasts until early autumn. And then you can see that the end result of the year is like he has kind of finished a cycle, a karmic cycle again, and he has actually built his self-confidence during that time and has really learned some like big lessons.
Okay.
But it's interesting with the most concrete I could say is like a lot of international energies. So it would be a little bit even strange, I think, if he didn't act on it. Actually starts already from the late May, not 18th of June, late May. He gets it double seven, then he gets 25-7, then double seven, but and then a double seven again. And with that much number seven, it's a little unlikely that he won't go somewhere and that it could be a longer travel. Or international affairs, of course, also a possibility. But when it stays like this, it's most probably that he's going somewhere. That could be a very, very likely, I would say.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So just to recap, thank you, Estelle. Fascinating stuff. So kind of to sort of sum it up for our listeners, basically, it's a 5 year. Essentially, it is all about us coming together making sure that we're not too polarized,
Yeah.
understanding that we still need to come together and support one another, even though we have different views about what is happening on the planet right now,
Yes.
making sure that we're staying in the positive polarity of the number.
Yes.
Also thinking outside the box. Business, it's a good year for business if you can think outside the box and you can do things differently and you can adapt and you don't get too entrenched in the old ways of being. So it really sounds to me like the people who, because if you think about it, people who are in 3D, their businesses are shut, their businesses are closed, they can't do anything. Whereas those of us living in the fifth dimension, we're kind of just getting on with it, and we're adapting and we're growing communities online was what you said as well, making sure we're feeling connected and supportive, but in an online basis rather than, physical, because we can't necessarily, which, for me in the Dharma Life Academy, that's exactly what we're doing. We're growing this. I had a call last week, Estel, we had 200 people, and it was literally, Mexico, Vietnam, Canada, Denmark, Sweden, you name it. Every country was involved. It was just superb.
So good. So good. And this joining with people from other countries, the numbers, the 52-7 energy outer diamond that I mentioned in the number 5 year we have, it's so good for this, creating these like groups and collectives and places where you can really like come together and share things. And then be aware in your emotional inner life that you don't like, we are right and they are wrong in the same time.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. That's really important. I'm gonna go and share that with my community, because I think that's such an important thing. And it's like there's lots of ascension traps, I think, at the moment, and one of them is this kind of spiritual arrogance that, we have to be so careful. We think we know what's happening, and we are literally. And I know from my work with the Akashic Records that sometimes people have blockages in their energy field, which means that they can't necessarily see what's going on right now. They literally can't see it. It's, like their reticular activation system just doesn't pick it up. And the tendency then is to get entrenched in our views and polarize and basically, I have it in my own relationship with Estel, because my husband is on a very different page from where I am. So, everything that's happening externally is happening internally. So yeah, fantastic, really interesting information. So, and I know you have just launched your first course in English, which is incredible. Yeah, so I really highly recommend Estel's work. As I said, I changed my name with her system and process, and it's been quite the journey, but an incredible one at the same time. And obviously you hail from Denmark, but I know you've just launched your first numerology course in English. So I'd love to know a little bit more about that, and so our listeners can find out more as well.
Yeah, sure. We launched 2 things just recently. One is a report where you can get an interpretation of all your numbers.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So if you're mostly like interested in what do I have, which numbers do I have, and generally from my birthday and my name, then the report is really good, and you kind of learn a lot in the same time. And then there's a course for people who actually want to learn to use this in your life, like for good, and to continue to always know what is my personal year rules right now, or what does this year say. All these things you can learn yourself to look into.
Right.
So we do have those 2 products, and then at one point we will also launch the huge the full education. I mean, that we currently only have in Denmark, but at one point it will be also in English. So for now we have the, like, you could say, level 1 of the education, which is an online course.
Amazing. And I'd love, Estel, if it's not too cheeky, I'd love to get a code for our listeners, for maybe the report. Maybe, I don't know if that's possible, but some way of because a lot of people listen to this podcast. Some type of discount would be amazing. And then, because I know how valuable those reports are. And having had my own numeroscope done, it was just freaky. I remember when we first did my old name, and I was like, wow, that is me to a T. Literally all my idiosyncrasies and my kind of good bits and my bad bits were in my name, which was just, and my date of birth. So absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, sure. I'll make a code for you.
Excellent. Thank you. And your the website that people can go to as well to find this?
Yes, it's numerologistpro.com.
numerologistpro.com. Well, we'll make sure we have all of that and all the hopefully the code and the name, the website and everything in the details. But thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. It's always such a fascinating conversation that we have.
Nice to talk to you.
Go check out Estel's work. You're on Instagram as well, aren't you? Or so
Not
much?
really, not
Facebook.
so much. Mostly we have our email. So if you sign up for our free tool where you can see your own numeroscope, you will get some information on email, and you will make sure to know when we have special offers and launch new products. So
Excellent.
mostly via an email.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for listening, guys. I really appreciate it. Please let me know in the comments what your favorite takeaway was from this conversation. And we will be back next week with another incredible guest on the Dharma Life podcast. Okay.